maybe a few behind-the-scenes memories, but instead she dropped words that cracked the Braxton family image wide open. She looked straight into the camera, her tone calm but sharp, and said what no one ever thought she would. Towanda Braxton exposed the truth about Traci, Toni, and Tamar, and suddenly fans realized this wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a family reckoning. The first blow came when Towanda addressed the accusation that the Braxton sisters mistreated Traci. Braxton, during her time on the show for years, fans have flooded comment sections claiming Traci was sidelined, humiliated, and pushed to the background. Blogs replay clips of Traci crying. Moments where she stormed off or sat quiet while the other sisters dominated conversations. The narrative was cemented. Traci was a forgotten Braxton, the one they didn't value. But Towanda leaned forward and challenged the head-on. "Give me an example," she said, her voice firm. "Show me receipts. Tell me when I personally treated Traci bad." That line cut straight through the noise. Fans had been screaming for years, but when pressed, none could pull out concrete proof of Towanda herself mistreating her late sister. And in that moment, she wasn't just defending herself. She was exposing how the internet spins a story until it becomes gospel truth. Still, the pain in her eyes reveals something deeper. Because whether or not Towanda was guilty, the public perception was already said. Traci Braxton's death left a wound so raw that fans cling to any memory of her, turning every argument into a symbol of neglect. Towanda's demand for receipts wasn't just a defense. It was her way of clawing back her identity, separating her real love for her sister from the edited storylines that made her look cold. And that's when she dropped the second bombshell editing to syllables that shook the entire Braxton fandom. Towanda broke down how producers manipulated footage, stretched moments, and exaggerated storylines until reality and fiction blurred. She used Toni Braxton as an example. "Remember the prom episode?" she asked. Toni said, "Where the prom at?" 3 or 4 times. But in the final cut, it looked like she said it 100 times. "How many times does it show you?" "Excuse me, you walk away from a confrontation." "Okay. I mean, it's tough being on outside and the people making faces while you that catches it all." "Honey, listen to me very carefully. We're not singing anymore today on camera. Can't do it. We can't ever seem to just have fun. We got to get it. Tamar, come here. Mommy, camera. Go, go, go." That's the magic of editing. Her words hit hard because fans remembered those scenes. They had laughed. They had mocked. They had replayed them endlessly. But now Towanda was telling them those laughs came at her sister's expense, crafted by editors who didn't care about truth. Only ratings do? It wasn't just about a funny line. It was about how a family's image had been twisted for a decade. When Tamar screamed, when Toni sighed, when Traci cried, how much of it was authentic? And how much of it was edited to look bigger, messier, or uglier? Towanda's explanation pulled back the curtain on reality TV, and suddenly fans had to question every tear in every fight they had consumed for years. Was the Braxton chaos real, or was it a circus built in the editing room? But Towanda didn't stop there. She reminded everyone watching, "We're not a cast. We're a family." That single sentence sent shockwaves across social media because it meant that unlike other reality shows where strangers play roles, the Braxton didn't just clock out after filming. If they fought on camera, they fought off camera too. If they cried on camera, the pain lingered when the lights went out. Fans had long speculated that the drama continued behind the scenes, but Towanda confirmed it. When the cameras stop, the arguments don't. We still have to pick up the phone. We can't pretend nothing happened the next day. This was more than a confession. It was an admission that the Braxton sisters' wounds were real and the show only magnified them. Suddenly, the phrase family drama wasn't entertainment anymore. It was generational pain bleeding out in front of millions. And yet, even as Towanda peeled back the layers of truth, she didn't let fans off the hook. Her tone sharpened when she turned her attention to the audience itself. She warned them to stop pitting sisters against sisters. "I can say something crazy about my sisters, but you better not." That line exploded across timelines. It was a warning and a claim of ownership. Braxton business belongs to Braxtons. Fans could watch, react, speculate. But when they crossed the line and used Traci's memory against her sisters, Towanda drew the boundary. In her eyes, outsiders had no right to weaponize her family's grief or gossip. And in that moment, the chat froze because Towanda wasn't just speaking as a reality star. She was speaking as a sister in mourning, drawing a line in the sand between her family's truth and the public's assumptions. But then came the moment that shifted the live from defensive to explosive. A fan asked the question that has haunted the Braxton for years. Why didn't y'all get paid like the Kardashians? The comparison that had been whispered in blogs was finally said out loud in Towanda's face. Her reaction calm but cutting. She questioned how anyone even knew what they got paid, reminding fans that numbers aren't always public, but the damage was done. That question opened a wound about worth, about fame, about how Black families on reality TV are marketed versus white families. The Kardashians built an empire off their chaos. The Braxtons bled publicly, but never reached that financial height. And with one simple question, Towanda was forced to confront the reality that her family gave the world their pain, but didn't get the same rewards. This sparked another wave of reflection. Towanda explained how history shaped their dynamics, how decades of family roles and responsibilities existed before cameras ever rolled. She revealed she was 36 when the show started with a lifetime of experiences behind her. That history mattered. Fans saw explosions on screen, but those fights were layered with years of childhood roles, sibling rivalries, and generational habits. Suddenly, the Braxton fights looked less like petty squabbles and more like scars ripped open by producers who didn't care about healing. Only drama. And then, in true Towanda fashion, she shifted gears. She laughed with her husband, joked about small family stories, teased him about music, even shared light-hearted moments about beauty and skincare. But the damage was done. By that point, fans weren't laughing with her. They were dissecting every word she had already said. Twitter threads erupted. TikToks replayed the show versus family line. Instagram pages clipped her warning about fans disrespecting sisters. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't about Towanda's marriage or her casual live. It was about the Braxtons' legacy being rewritten in real time. What started as a simple live turned into a viral confession. Towanda had opened the door and fans rushed through demanding more. Was she defending herself out of guilt or exposing the truth because she was tired of lies? Did her words honor Traci or dismiss her struggles? And most importantly, if the Braxtons' reality was shaped by editing, then how much of what fans believed for over a decade was ever real? Towanda left those questions hanging in the air, refusing to give simple answers. And that's why her live didn't just trend for a night. It became the start of a new debate about the Braxton family. For the first time, the sisters weren't being judged by what producers showed on screen. They were being judged by the cracks Towanda revealed from behind the curtain. And this was only the beginning. Because if Towanda was willing to expose the editing tricks, defend Traci's legacy, and call out fan toxicity, what else was she holding back? What secrets about Toni Braxton's role? About Tamar Braxton's battles? About family betrayal still untouched might come next? The silence had been broken and once broken. Silence can never silence Towanda, Braxton shattered. And that Liv didn't. Braxton shattered. And that Liv didn't just stop with her words. It echoed across the fandom, bouncing from one Braxton sister to another, forcing everyone to face questions they had long avoided. If Towanda was bold enough to challenge the world's perception of Traci, what did that mean for Toni Braxton and Tamar Braxton? The two sisters most often caught in the center of fan debates, and if the editing was truly twisting their reality, then how much of their legendary chaos was truth, and how much was manufactured? Towanda doubled down during her live, pointing out that when people watch Braxton family values, they thought they were witnessing a complete picture. But she reminded everyone that the editors had only a few hours to tell the stories of 5 sisters, each with decades of history. That meant selective storytelling. Some scenes were cut, others were rearranged. And in the end, the audience wasn't watching reality. They were watching a version of it. She revealed how moments from different days were pieced together, painting her or her sisters as villains, victims, or fools, depending on what story the network wanted to push that week. Work wanted to push that week. And that's when the comments started exploding with Tamar's name. Fans typed furiously, So you mean all those Tamar meltdowns were edited to look worse? Was Tamar's attitude exaggerated for ratings? Towanda didn't name names, but the way she spoke made it clear Tamara wasn't just fighting her sisters. She was fighting the producers too. Every sigh, every scream, every clapback from Tamara had been stretched, looped, and magnified until she became both a breakout star and the lightning rod of the show. Tawanda's revelation hit a nerve because Tamar's fanbase has always been divided. Some worship her boldness, others accuse her of tearing the family apart. But if editing played the role, Towanda claimed that Tamar wasn't just while she was framed. The internet lit up with debates. Was Tamar the real victim of producer manipulation? Or was Towanda just protecting herself by redirecting blame? Either way, the conversation reignited old scars, and then came Toni Braxton's name, dropped like a bomb at Live. Towanda admitted that Toni's calm, collective persona was also shaped by editing. The network leaned heavily on Toni as a superstar, the Grammy winner, the anchor. But behind the scenes, Towanda implied, Toni wasn't always as detached as fans thought. She had her moments of frustration, her disagreements, her tears, but much of that was cut to preserve her image as the responsible one. Towanda's words painted Toni not as the untouchable big sister, but as a woman who carried her own burdens. Silenced by the edit to keep her pedestal polished, that revelation shocked fans because it exposed a painful truth. Toni's grace wasn't always organic. It was cured, and by protecting her image, the editors may have sacrificed the authenticity of the entire family dynamic. Suddenly, even Toni, who many fans saw as above the mess, was dragged into the same web of manipulation. But the deepest cut came when Towanda circled back to Traci Braxton. Her voice softened, her eyes shifting as she explained that what fans saw of Traci on television was never the full woman. There was a life before the cameras. She reminded everyone, decades of being the youngest sister, struggling to find her place, fighting to be heard, had already shaped Traci before the show ever started. What the world saw was only fragments of that pain, edited into explosive moments for entertainment. Towanda insisted that the truth was more complex. Traci was loved. Traci was included. But Traci was also misunderstood by the world, by producers, and sometimes even by her own sisters. Her words carried weight because they touched the one thing fans couldn't argue against: grief. Traci's passing left an empty chair at every reunion, a silence that no editing trick could manipulate. By speaking on Traci, Towanda wasn't just defending herself. She was rewriting the narrative, reminding the world that Traci wasn't just a storyline. She was a sister, a mother, a woman with her own life beyond the camera. Still, fans weren't satisfied. The comments grew sharper. Some accused Towanda of gaslighting, of downplaying Traci's pain. Others applauded her for finally addressing what no Braxton had dared to say. The split of the fandom grew wider, and Towanda's calm delivery only fueled the fire. But then came the most uncomfortable part of the live. Her blunt message to the audience. She told fans to stop dividing the sisters with toxic narratives. "We're family," she said again, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "You're not supposed to pit us against each other." That line shook the viewers because it wasn't just a plea, it was a scolding. Towanda wasn't asking, she was demanding respect. She reminded everyone that while fans consume the drama for entertainment, the Braxton have to live with it long after the credits roll. This was where her husband chimed in, cracking jokes to lighten the mood. But even his laughter couldn't mask the tension, because what Towanda was really saying was this: the world had profited from their pain, laughed at their chaos, speculated on their relationships, but when the cameras turned off, the family still had to pick up the broken pieces, and that wasn't enough. Towanda brought up another raw nerve: money. That infamous question comparing the Braxton to the Kardashians wasn't going away, and though Towanda brushed it off, the implication lingered. Why didn't the Braxton get the same financial empire? Why did one family turn fights into billions while the other barely scraped past reality TV checks? The comparison reopened a wound not just about paychecks, but about respect in the entertainment industry. Were the Braxton undervalued because they were Black women, because their pain was treated as disposable instead of marketable? Fans knew this was bigger than drama. It was about exploitation. Towanda didn't say the words outright, but her frustration was clear. The Braxton gave authenticity. The Kardashians gave spectacle, yet only one was rewarded like royalty. That question alone fueled endless debates online with fans calling out networks, producers, and even the Braxton themselves for not demanding more. And then in a twist no one expected, Towanda reminded everyone of something the cameras never captured. Life beyond the show. She spoke about history before contracts, childhood memories before fame. Bonds formed long before producers entered the picture. It was a reminder that no matter how much footage was edited, the Braxton had decades of blood, sweat, tears, and love binding them together. The world only saw slivers, but the real story was written in years of cameras would never touch. By the time the live edged into its final minutes, the tension had shifted. It wasn't just about Towanda defending herself anymore. It was about redefining the Braxton legacy. She laughed with her husband, joked about family, friends, teased about music and beauty, but the heaviness never left. The audience couldn't forget the confession she had already made. The casual banter felt like a mask covering the aura she had just exposed. And that's why the lip didn't end with closure. It ended with more questions. Did Towanda reveal these truths to protect her own reputation? Or was she bravely exposing how her family had been exploited? Was she defending Traci's honor or rewriting history to ease her own guilt? Was she protecting Toni and Tamar or subtly calling out the network for twisting them into caricatures? The comment section was a war zone by the time she logged off. Fans were divided, half praising Towanda for finally speaking, half accusing her of erasing the pain fans had seen with their own eyes. But regardless of which side they chose, one thing was undeniable. The Braxton story was no longer controlled by the producers. It was being rewritten by the sisters themselves. Towanda's live wasn't just content. It was a turning point. And if she was brave enough to open this door, then the next question was inevitable. Would Toni and Tamara respond? Would they confirm her claims or call her out for twisting the truth? And if they did, would new secrets would come spilling out into the light? One thing was clear, this wasn't the end. Towanda had started something bigger than a live. She had started a war of narratives, and the Braxton family name would never be the same again, or be put back together again when Towanda Braxton ended her life. The internet didn't calm down. It exploded. Hashtags carrying Traci Braxton's name trended worldwide. Clips of Towanda saying "we're family, not a cast" were reposted thousands of times. And instantly the question on every fan's lips was simple. What will Toni and Tamar say? Because Towanda hadn't just spoken for herself, she had spoken for the entire family. And in doing so, she had forced her sisters into the conversation whether they wanted it or not. Whether they wanted it or not. For years, Toni Braxton had been careful, choosing her words with the same precision she used to craft a song. She wasn't the sister who jumped on live. She wasn't the one throwing shade on Twitter. Toni played the long game, keeping her brand polished, her dignity intact. But now Towanda's revelations had dragged her into the spotlight. Fans began tagging Toni relentlessly. Is it true your image was protected? Well, your sisters were made to look messy. Did producers cut your breakdowns to keep you looking strong? Toni's silence was deafening. Because in the world of celebrity, silence isn't neutral. It's fuel. And the longer she stayed quiet, the more the internet believed Towanda's version of events. Then there was Tamar Braxton. Unlike Toni, Tamar was never one to hold back. She had lived her truth out loud through tears, tantrums, and triumphs. Her fans, the Tamarians, were fierce defenders, but they were also quick to call out anything that smelled a betrayal. And now with Towanda suggesting that editing manipulated Tamar's image, fans wondered, would Tamar thank her sister for defending her or blast her for reopening old wounds? The suspense was brutal. Blogs speculated daily. Some claimed Tamar was quietly liking shady posts on Instagram. Others swore she was preparing to drop her own live, ready to set the record straight. And through all of this, one name hung heavier than the rest, Traci Braxton. Even in death, her presence loomed over everything. Towanda had tried to defend herself, But fans couldn't forget the moments of Traci's pain captured on camera, her tears, her frustration, her sense of being left out. Towanda's words made people ask, was Traci's mistreatment exaggerated for television? Or had her cries for respect been ignored until it was too late? That question cut deeper than any editing debate because it touched on guilt. Guilt the sisters might carry forever. The Live had cracked open that guilt like never before. Fans began revisiting old clips, dissecting every expression, every sigh, every silence. They pulled receipts, not just against Towanda, but against all the sisters. Look at Toni ignoring Traci here. Look at Tamar dismissing her here. The archives became ammunition. And suddenly, the Braxton family's decade-long legacy of reality TV was under trial by the court of public opinion. Towanda's husband had tried to soften the moment with jokes, but even he couldn't change the fact that his wife had triggered a cultural reckoning. The Braxtons weren't just entertainment anymore. They were a case study in how reality TV consumes real families, bits out caricatures, and leaves them to pick up the pieces. And then came the whispers about money again. Fans pointed out that while the Kardashians built an empire, the Braxton were left with fractured relationships and modest fame. It stung because in hindsight, it seemed like the Braxton had given more. More authenticity, more vulnerability, more pain, and receive less. The internet began to frame it as exploitation, as another example of how Black women's stories are undervalued in Hollywood. Towanda hadn't said those words herself, but she didn't need to. The fans carry that narrative forward, turning her live into a conversation about race, respect, and reality TV ethics. Still, Towanda had made one thing clear. Despite the editing, despite the rumors, despite the scandals, the Braxtons were still a family. We could say things about each other, but outsiders can't. She had warned. It was a line drawn in fire, and yet it only made the fans dig deeper. Because if the Braxton themselves could air their grievances on television, why couldn't the audience join in? That contradiction kept fueling the fire. Meanwhile, whispers spread that producers from the Braxton Season 2 were watching this unfold with panic and excitement. On one hand, Towanda's Live threatened to expose the very tricks that made the show work. On the other, it guaranteed higher ratings than ever. After all, what's better for television than a sister exposing the blueprint of reality TV itself? But beneath the ratings and hashtags, there was a haunting truth. Traci Braxton's absence was more visible than ever. Every time Towanda defended herself, it raised a question. If Traci were still alive, would she agree or would she call Towanda out? Would she confirm that editing twisted her pain or insist that her struggles were real and ignored by her family? That unanswered question lingered like a ghost in the room, heavier than anything Towanda or her sisters could say. The fandom grew divided into camps. Some sided with Towanda, praising her for courageously pulling back the curtain. Others accused her of rewriting history, silencing Traci's voice in the process. And then there were those who waited anxiously for Toni and Tamar to break their silence, believing their responses would tip the balance of truth. What made it even messier was the fact that every sister had her own brand, her own audience, her own way of telling the story. Toni had music. Tamara had talk shows and podcast. Towanda had her own ventures. Each one could frame the narrative in a way that benefited them. And fans knew it, which meant every word, every post, every silence became another puzzle piece of the Braxton saga. Towanda might have thought she was defending herself. But what she really did was start a war of narratives. And wars like that don't end quickly. They fester, they grow, they consume everything in their path. By the time the live was replayed and reposted on every blog, the story had already spun out of her hands. Headlines screamed, Towanda Braxton calls out editing lies. Towanda defends Traci against mistreatment claims. Towanda warns fans to stay out of Braxton business. The sisters have become characters again. Not by editing this time, but by the audience's insatiable hunger for drama. And maybe that was the cruelest irony of all. Towanda went live to expose the manipulation of reality TV. But in doing so, she fed the very cycle she wanted to escape. Because once the internet gets hold of a narrative, it doesn't let go. It twists. It edits. It exaggerates. Just like the producers she had called out. Only this time, the editors weren't in a studio. They were fans, bloggers, and influencers rewriting her words into clickbait. The future of the Braxton family brand now hung in the balance. Would this controversy fuel the Braxton Season 2 with record ratings? Or would it fracture the sisters beyond repair? Would Toni risk her polished image to confirm Towanda's truth or protect her silence? Would Tamar explode onto Instagram Live with her own fiery side of the story? And most haunting of all, would Traci's memory be honored in this chaos or reduced to another storyline debated by strangers? Towanda had cracked open the truth, but the truth comes with consequences. And as the dust settled, one thing was clear. The Braxton name would never again be seen through the same lens. The show, the sisters, the legacy, all of it was being rewritten, not by producers, but by the sisters themselves. The silence was broken. The curtain was pulled back, and the world was watching, waiting for the next sister to step forward with her truth. To step forward with her truth. To step forward with her truth.